biggest piece of advice I have
Yeah.
in really everything, especially in scripts, is surprises. The more you can surprise somebody in your writing, the better.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Jamin. Welcome back to Screenwriters Need to Hear This. I got a very great guest today. This is my old friend, Andy Gordon. And Andy, let me give you a proper introduction because I got to be honest. So, see, my partner Steve and I, we play this game often of like who has better credits, and I would say for sure, you got to be up there. I mean, you got to be in the up there, like comedy writers with the best credits in Hollywood right now, for sure. So,
well, thanks.
Oh, for sure. I'm going to run through some of your credits. I guess you started on Get a Life, but right? Okay.
Yeah, started on Get a Life. Actually started before that on Kids Incorporated, but Get a Life was my first adult show.
First adult one. Okay, right. Get a Life. Then he was on Mad About You. Then Dream On, also one of my favorite shows. News Radio, Jeff Foxworthy Show, then Just Shoot Me, where we worked together for 4 years. Or no, maybe less. I don't remember how long you were there for.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm going to run through your credits, and then I'll stop talking. Then I'll let you say something. At the 45-minute mark, then I'll let you say something. Then DAG, which you co-created with your partner. I'm gonna skip some. I'm going to skip some here. Well, Hot Properties, The Loop, Back to You, True Jackson, which you were the showrunner, Last Man Standing, Friend Me, Kirsty, which we worked together briefly on, Mystery Girls, which you ran, then Modern Family, Big Bang Theory, United States of Al, and then currently now Call Me Kat. Dude.
Yeah, I'm ending big.
You're ending big. Thank you so much for doing this. And I got to say one more thing before I let you talk. On Just Shoot Me, where I was, you were a co-exec and I was a staff writer, and it was like, it's a handful of guys. It was always about making you and a couple other people just laugh because you were seriously one of the funniest writers in Hollywood, for sure. And I remember reading your first script that you wrote on that, Lemon Wacky Hello, as a staff writer. I remember reading it in the office and thinking, this is perfect. All right, I guess when do we shoot it? And then you got notes on it. I was like, notes? Like, why? What do you mean notes? Like, why are there notes on this? Why don't we? I didn't realize like that's what you do. You just get notes on stuff. Like, no matter how good it is, there's always notes to change it or improve it. But anyway, so thank you, Andy, for coming here.
Yeah. And I should say that to your listeners, to your viewers, you're one of the funniest guys I've ever worked with.
That's nuts.
And you were hilarious in the room at Just Shoot Me right from day one.
I disagree. I think you're remembering it wrong.
Maybe I am.
I remember being so intimidated by everyone, Marsh and you and Angle and Levitan. Like what can I just felt like I didn't even belong at the table.
Am I remembering it correctly? Did you come up with the name Dennis Finch?
I came up with the name Dennis because I was like Dennis the Menace. That was my only contribution all the first season.
No, you had that amazing Nina Van Horn line that I remembered for 25 years.
What was that one?
So, Wendy Malick had some weird line, and we needed a follow-up to it, and then you pitched, I forget who it was, maybe it was George Siegel saying, Nina, when you tilt your head sideways, does it sound like a rain stick?
Yeah, I remember pitching that, and Levitan goes, did you write that? I'm like, well, yeah, and like he thought I stole it or something. It couldn't have come from my mouth. He was so confused.
Yeah.
Wait, but how many? I don't remember how many. Were you there 3 years or 2 years? How many years were you on Just Shoot Me?
I was there 3 years, but I was there for both pilots. It's actually an interesting story, which is that one night, and this was back when I was single, when this thing could happen, I got a call at like 10 p.m. from my agent, who was also Levitan's agent. And he said, hey, do you know Steve Levitan? I said, I've met him when he was on Larry Sanders. I used to be around that set a lot when he was there. And I said, I know him a little bit, but not really. He said, well, he's turning in his pilot to NBC tomorrow. And he was hoping to punch it up a little bit. I'm like, yeah. He goes, can you go over to his house and write jokes? I was like, well, I don't know him that well.
Right.
He said no, he asked for you. so I got there at like 11 p.m. and his wife put on a pot of coffee and we wrote jokes until the sun came up.
Really? Wait, just you and him?
Just the two of us for Just Shoot Me. And then we ended up helping on the first pilot, which didn't quite go. It was close. And then we were there for the second pilot, and that got on the air.
Wait, I didn't even know there was a first. That was a season earlier?
No, there was two pilots. The first pilot didn't have Spade in it.
Right, I know, but I thought it was picked up. I thought it was picked up without Spade.
My memory is that it didn't.
No, because I think you're remembering it wrong because we were hired on that.
Well,
and
this is outrageous.
This is outrageous. Then Spade became available, and I remember Levitan coming to the room. Do you think we should bring this David Spade guy on? And
So maybe that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first pilot had a different receptionist named Connor.
Right.
Who was a little broad, and also the set was weird because it had a low fence.
Right.
And the low fence only showed in master shots, in your wide shots.
Right.
But it didn't show in two shots or singles. So as people walked around the set, they would navigate this fence in a way that was very weird because you didn't know why they were moving that way.
That's interesting. I remember everyone saying the set was weird, but why would they design it that way? I mean,
I don't know. So you were forced to go to the master shot more often than you would have wanted to, just to explain why people are making a weird zigzag pattern across the room.
And this is interesting because this is something as a staffer, like I would have no idea. I remember being on set, and Eileen, your old partner, used to watch the monitor all the time, and she would explain to me. I was like, "What are you looking at?" Because there's a quad split, and I'm like, "How do you know what you're looking at?" Like no one knows what you're looking. And she would explain to me, "Oh, this is how you watch a quad split."
Like, well, I remember that you were the watcher of the background actors.
That used to drive me crazier than everyone else did. I don't know why. Why did that make me upset?
No, I don't know. I remember one time, sort of out of my peripheral vision, seeing you getting all hot under the collar. And after taking, I'm like, what's wrong? And you're like, what are those guys doing in the background? Yeah. By the way, can I curse on this thing?
Go ahead. No one's listening. Go ahead.
And you were like, what the fuck are those guys? I'm like, what? And down the hall to Elliot's photo studio, way down the set, two background actors had taken it upon themselves to create a little backstory that they were in a fight. Yeah. And they were shoving each other.
There was it was, as I remember, it was they have a deadline and they're going to miss their deadline. And I remember talking to them. I go, what are you guys doing here? What are you guys doing in the background? Well, we're on deadline. I'm like, well, whatever the fuck is going on there, it's more interesting than the shit that I wrote. So knock it off.
Yeah, I remember you losing your mind at them.
What, isn't that normal? Wasn't I supposed to lose my mind over that? Oh my God. But we had some fun. If you had to go back, listen, you've worked on some amazing shows. If you had to go back or could go back to work on one again, either at a reboot or whatever, what would it be?
Well, that was a pretty fun show. So that it might be that one because everything George Siegel did made me laugh. Spade was hilarious. That writer's room was really solid. Pam Brady was so funny, and Zucker was crazy. So that it might be that one. And Levitan was terrific. But I also had a ton of fun, surprisingly, on my show True Jackson.
Why was that? Other than running it.
Yeah, it was sort of the perfect show at the perfect time for me because I had two very young daughters,
right,
who were like the exact perfect age for that show. So that was great. I could use the show for important messaging for them. Like there were things I wanted them to learn that I would put in the show. Like so what? It was valuable in that sense.
Like what kind of like what? That's so interesting. I wouldn't have.
Well, one of my daughters was a real perfectionist, and it was making her crazy.
Uh-huh.
So I said, "Look, I'd like to do an episode where True is challenged and fails, and it's okay, because all you have to do is try and take something from it, but you don't have to succeed all the time." And the network liked the script, but said, "Hey, we would love it if True had a victory at the end." And I said, no, that's the exact reason we're doing this episode is that she doesn't have a victory. Mm-hmm. And they were like, well, could she have like maybe an inadvertent victory? And I said, no. And they were like, well, we would love it if she, we want it to be aspirational. I'm like, this is the episode we're doing. If you don't want to do it, let's shut down for the week. And they let me do it. but that was, it was an important show in that sense. And then what was great was early on in that show, I told the casting department that I would be casting the show, and I would give them a heads up on who I was casting, and they could ding somebody by the end of the day if they didn't like somebody I was casting. But otherwise, I would be casting the show myself.
But what do you mean that? I mean, wait, first of all, this is always the case. If you don't approve of the cast, you don't, as a showrunner, they're not in the show.
No, the networks always have a lot of input on your casting decisions.
On Nickelodeon or
on everything.
Now it's more, yeah.
So on episode, I think it was 2 or 3 of True Jackson, we cast an actress, and a couple days later they said, "Hey, we lost that actress. Do you want to go with your second choice?" And I said, "What do you mean we lost her? How'd that happen?" Like, "Oh, they didn't approve her in time." I said, "Well, that's not going to work." So I wrote them a letter saying, "From now on, I'm casting the show." And I didn't expect it to work, but it did. They were like, "Okay, we got it."
The ball's on you.
Yeah.
The ball's on you.
Yeah. So I got lucky, but in that case, it made the show so much fun because I just cast who I wanted to, meet or work with every week. So it was one sort of alternative comic after another. It was all Largo comedians.
Right.
In some cases, we would start that way. We would say, okay, what would be funny for Paul F. Tompkins?
Right.
And like, it'd be funny if it was Career Week and he's a spy. Done.
Right.
So that made that part of the experience really fun. And then also like what we would destroy each week, because we were given a mandate to have lots of stunts and destruction to bring in a boy audience. Although we found when we tested it that girls liked this just as much. So with a mandate to destroy things, we were like, what do we want to break this week? We're like, let's do an art gallery.
And the notes were pretty light on that.
Very light, and all smart, all light. So that was a fun show. I would do that one again. In fact, I tried to this year with them as a movie.
Oh, and they said, "Nice try."
No, we wrote 3 drafts, but I think Kiki got too famous. I don't think she's ever going to do it.
Yeah, isn't she having a kid now too? I think
she had a kid. She had a daughter, son, one of those 2.
Wow, could be, yeah, one or the other. But that's so interesting. And so you go back to those. It's so funny that you say that Just Shoot Me, because in my memory, Just Shoot Me was kind of like one of the best drafts I've written on for sure. But it was also my memory is a little weird because as a staff writer, like, what do I know? Like everyone was a rock star as far as I can see. So it was very intimidating. But that's how I would remember it as well. Like, what a staff! Like everywhere you go is,
yeah,
yeah,
no,
each other to be
the staff was great, and Steve was a very good showrunner on it.
Yeah.
That was a good time.
Yeah, how interesting. Now, but how do you? Let's get all the questions.
And honestly, Big Bang Theory was pretty fun too.
But that was a big staff, wasn't it?
Pretty big. Only 9 of us.
Oh, okay.
But literally everybody in the room could pitch a line that you could knock out of the park.
And at that point, pretty much everyone was it was very top heavy, right? Everyone had a lot of experience.
Yeah, I was like the new kid.
And how many years were you on it?
I was only there 2. I was on the last 2.
When you jumped in, did you watch every single episode?
No, I watched like 5 episodes.
You're supposed to say you watched every single one. Well, then how did you? You're supposed to say I did a lot of homework. But so how did you know who the characters were?
Well, they were all famous. I knew enough, but no, I did not do my research.
Oh my God. And then, no, but how did you break in years ago? How did you break into the business?
Well, it was a lot of flukes, honestly. My first foray in was a lot of being in the right place at the right time. And then sort of taking advantage of it, which is, one thing I always tell younger writers is you really need 2 of 3 things. You need luck, you need some tenacity, some perseverance, and you need talent. And sometimes one of those is enough. And sometimes 2, it's helpful if you have 3. But I just got lucky because I drove cross country after graduating college. As a fluke, I lucked into a job as a PA on a new kid show called Kids Incorporated.
Right.
And after my first day of working there, the producers called me into their office and said, welcome aboard. Use the show as a learning experience. I said, oh, yeah. I've already read all the scripts you have. And they said, oh, yeah, you want to be a writer? I said, yeah. They said, do you think you could write this show? I said, yeah. They're like, we'll give it a shot sometime. And they were being a little, polite, but, a little patronizing.
Right.
But I'm used to college. So I went home and wrote a script that night and put it on their desk the next morning. And they came in and said, where's this from? I'm like, well, you told me to write it. I wrote it. They're like, we're going to produce it. I was like, oh, that's great. They're like, yeah, it's actually in better shape than the one we're supposed to shoot next week. So we're going to shoot it. We're going to table read it on Monday. This was like a Tuesday.
And these are the writers, the head, the showrunner you're talking to.
This was the executive producer.
Okay.
And so my first
That's nuts.
week in California, I sold my first script. They shot it the next week.
Your first week in California.
Yeah. So it was really being in the right place at the right time, taking advantage of a situation. Then I ended up writing 2 or 3 more that first season while still being a PA.
Oh, they didn't even give you a staff writing job.
No, I was still the PA. It was hilarious. They'd be like, Andy, you got to cut 5 pages from the middle act and give me some pistachio nuts.
That'll keep you humble. Okay.
Yeah. And then season 2, though, they made me head writer.
What?
Yeah. So I was head writer the second season. And what was funny is, they gave me an office. They came in one day. They said, how are you doing hiring a staff? I'm like, I'm not going to have a staff. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm going to write them. They're like, no. You have to have a staff to write them. But I ended up writing a lot of them, and paid off all my college loans.
Wow. But when did you decide you wanted to be a writer? Like what age?
Oh, I was young. I've loved TV since I was a kid.
Oh yeah, but did you think you could write then? I mean,
yeah.
It didn't occur when I was a kid. I did, I watched probably as much TV as you, but I didn't know really they were writers.
I don't know. It's all I ever wanted to do was write TV and movies. I couldn't have come out here fast enough after graduating college. I got in the car the next day and drove here.
And did you have a place to stay?
I stayed on my uncle's couch.
And he was in LA?
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to say, it's funny because of all the writers that I know who are working, I definitely think you enjoy the work more than anyone I know. You enjoy everything about being in TV.
I do. In fact, on Dream On, we broke every day at 7 on the dot. David Crane and Marta Kaufman ran that show, and they really were on a very strict schedule, and they would wrap every day at 7 on the dot. And I would always, like at 6:30, start feeling like, oh, I don't want it to end. There's only half an hour left.
Wow.
Yeah. And when the day was over, I was like, oh, damn. All right. At least we got tomorrow.
Do you still feel that way though?
Probably a little less so. Now I'm, sometimes if it gets a little late, my eyes on the clock.
Right.
Like it's enough already for today. But it's still pretty fun.
I remember on Just Shoot Me, we were working, I don't remember whatever episode it was, and you had a take for it. You're like, I don't know, I think this scene should go this way. And Steve was like, no, this is the way we're gonna do it. You go, well, let me just stay late and do it my way, and I'll just give it to you tomorrow. And I remember sitting with you in your office. It was just me and you, and we were banging out that scene. And then Steve read it, and I think he tossed it aside. But I was like, wow, this guy's gonna stay late. And I want to see what it was about.
That's funny. I don't remember that, but I had a similar experience with Steve and Chris on Back to You, where I pitched an idea, and they were like, I don't know. I'm like, I just think it's going to be so funny, and I pitched it like a second time. I reworked some of it, and they were like, yeah, we're not sure. So I just wrote it anyway, and we ended up producing it. It was pretty funny.
Oh wow, they liked it.
Yeah, they liked it when they saw it finally.
And that's because you've written first with Steve Levitan and Chris Lloyd on Back to You, and then Just Shoot Me, then later on Modern Family. But and you have, it's funny because I haven't worked in network TV, I think, in 15 years. I'm trying to think. It's all been cable or streaming. And so how has it changed? But you were plenty in network. How has it changed for you? Is it what's it like now?
Uh, it's mostly the same as the process.
Mhm.
Table reads the same, notes afterwards, go back for the rewrite. Um,
Are the hours still really long?
no, they've gotten better.
Why is that?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. But I know that when I left, when I went to Modern Family, saying to my wife, okay, the days of being home for dinner are over.
Mm,
And they weren't. That show got out at 6:30 every night. I'm like,
damn.
okay. And then when I left Modern Family, went to Big Bang Theory, I said the same thing. Like, all right, now I'm back on a multicam.
Mhm.
It's all over. Take a picture of me, kids. This is it. And then that show was even earlier. We'd be out at 5.
And you start at 10, from 10 to 5?
We start 10 to 5. It was a pretty. It was a word. Like there was not a lot of chit chat.
But that's kind of unheard of still, because you get network tossing out scripts and
Yeah, although
they left that
they
alone.
didn't do it with Chuck Lorre.
Yeah. But
So
even
that
so, you would have to come up with a script. Chuck would have to read it. You'd think Chuck would toss it out, you know?
he would throw out a lot of stuff, or he would throw out stories that weren't adding up. But usually, by the time they went to a table, that's
Mhm.
how we would shoot them.
Wow. Wow. Do
The,
you go
the
ahead?
rewrites would go quickly. He'd come in and blast through a rewrite in under an hour.
Wow. Do you have a preference, single or multi-camera?
Well, multi's a little bit more exciting because it's like making a movie,
Yeah.
but the hours are a little worse.
Yeah.
Multi's a little bit more fun because you're hearing sort of a live reaction to your jokes.
Right.
So that's fun, and the hours are a little better. But like Modern Family, you know, you'd go into like a neighborhood and take over the neighborhood,
Right.
and it was just cool.
But you were as the writer. How did it go? You were always on set on your episodes? Was Steve or Chris on set ever, or
Yeah.
one of them would always be on set?
Well, they ran their own episodes,
Right.
so one would run even numbered episodes, one would run odd numbered episodes. And if you were doing one of theirs, they would generally be there.
And the writer of that episode, and they would have to break. I don't know how they would. I don't know how they did that and break stories while being on set.
Yeah, they would come and go a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
And if it was a scene in one of the houses, like the Pritchett house or the Dunphy house, it was on set, so you could kind of go back to the office for a lot. It would get a little tricky if you were on location.
Yeah, right. Because those shows I've done, single camera, we're always on location. I'm like, I don't know, this is kind of boring and uncomfortable. You know.
I wrote an episode that was in a mountain cabin. It was a Christmas episode,
Uh-huh.
where Gloria rents a winter cabin, and we needed a cabin, like a big house that looked like it was in Big Bear or somewhere.
Mhm.
And we found one by Will Rogers State Park off Sunset. And I remember when we walked in, when we were location scouting, saying like, yeah, I want to hang out here for a week. This is going to be great.
Uh-huh.
And everybody was in the episode because it was a an episode where all the cast was together. In a
Right.
lot of those storylines, you would have a day with Mitch and Cam, and then a day with the Dunphys. But
Right.
this one was the entire cast all together for a week, and that didn't get boring at all. That was just every moment of it was exciting, and you were in this giant house.
Wow. See, we did an episode of Wilfred. We shot in Santa Monica, I think. We rented a nice house and we were doing rewrites in the kid's bedroom upstairs. So
Yeah.
writers were sitting on the bed. It was like, and it was 10 o'clock at night. It's like, the kid wants to go to sleep. Like, what are we doing here? That wasn't fun. No, it's so interesting because I guess if you work on a high budget show, when we did Marin, we shot an episode in a crack house, and it was a crack house. Like, you don't want to be in a crack house.
Yeah.
I remember
No.
walking out, wow, you guys did a great job dressing it. Like, we didn't touch it.
Yeah, I'll say that between Modern Family and Big Bang Theory, like being on hit shows, it's a whole different deal.
in the money? You mean?
Yeah, the locations are beautiful. The craft services is amazing.
Right. And what's it like on Call Me Cat now?
Well, that's it's a little bit of an odd process where there's two rooms. There's a downstairs B room,
Okay.
and I was running the B room, and the B room would write outlines, and then the upstairs room would give us notes. We'd rewrite the outline, and then we would write a first draft, and then the draft would go upstairs to get rewritten.
And the A room, what were they doing? They were breaking the stories? What were they
Not
doing?
really.
So the B room was doing everything.
I don't want to be on camera saying the B room did, but the B room did it quite a bit.
And how big was the staff?
Very big.
Oh, and so you were basically hired because you worked with the people on United States of Al, right?
Yeah.
And so they knew you, and so you were basically hired to be the number two.
No, there was plenty of number twos. But I ended up going down and running this sort of ragtag B room that I ended up falling in love with.
Just because they're nice people.
Great people, younger writers, sort of excited by things. It was sort of fun to feel like a little bit of a teacher.
Interesting. See, that's one of the things I actually miss about working now is that I'm the old guy and I don't get to, I miss being around the old people who are more experienced than me to hear their stories and to, basically learn from them still, that's something I'd miss.
Mm-hmm.
I do like being the teacher.
Both things are fun. Both things are fun. But that was good because, it's so funny. There's a little bit of I think a thought that older writers can be a little hacky. But I think younger writers are pretty hacky. And there's a lot of saying people would pitch jokes. I'm like, hey, do you think this is funny? And they're like, well, it's a joke. I'm like, no, it's a joke. I'm just curious. Like, I'm not being a dick, but do you find, if you saw this, would you laugh? And they're like, yeah, maybe. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. You got to pitch things that you think are funny.
So they were just pitching basically clams that they heard on TV.
Or familiar joke structures.
How funny is that?
Yeah, for me, lots of times jokes are funny that aren't jokes at all.
Like what?
Like a weird reaction to something.
Right.
Or you put an ice cream cone in someone's hand and whatever they say is a little bit funnier because they like the ice cream cone.
Well, yeah. That's so, because I'm just shooting. I remember learning so much from you, like learning about clams, learning about pipe, learning about all this stuff. Like, there's so much I need to know here. I just have no idea how any of it works. But so it's interesting. So that's what gets you out of bed. That you're still excited about, that part, mentoring and.
Well, I like all of it. I like writing a scene that's either funny or moving, and then seeing it get acted out. That's pretty exciting.
Right.
On United States of Al, oftentimes if I thought a scene would be meaty or that I wanted, like was excited about seeing, I would just go write it before anybody else did. And often they stayed that way.
What? Because the showrunner liked it, you mean?
Yeah. Like if I knew we have a scene, we don't know what it's going to be, but the lead, Parker on United States of Al was going to talk to his therapist, who was played by Blake Clark. I'd be like, I just know that scene's going to be funny and rich, and I would just go write it. And they would often put it in just because it was easier to just put it in,
right?
Or Dean Norris. I had a scene where he talks to his wife at her gravesite, and I just ran off and wrote that. Instead of even pitching it.
You didn't even ask them. You just said, hey, check this out.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, what about this? And they were like, oh, wow, that's pretty moving.
Oh, wow, that's great. That's great. I had a question on that. Now, how do you feel like new writers, I don't know, do you feel like they've changed since the day? Are they different now?
Yeah, well, the new sensitivity is tricky.
Right.
So it's pretty tricky.
Do you want to elaborate on that or no? It's okay if you don't.
You even have to be careful in talking about it. But as an example, I did a punch up on an independent movie,
Mhm.
and there was a character who was sort of a good-natured redneck, and it was a room full of very young, sort of very woke writers. And I said, I have a pitch here, but I want to preface this by saying, in my pitch, the character is going to use a word we don't use, and it's going to hit your ear funny. I'm not using this word. This character is going to use this word. And another character is going to correct him and say, we don't use that word. And he's going to say, oh, I'm sorry. So, and then he's going to try another word, and they're going to say, you know what? That one's no good either. I'm like, and that's going to be the joke.
And you're going to laugh.
I'm like, but I don't want anybody to get upset when they hear the word the first time, because the premise of the joke is that the guy doesn't want to be that bad a guy. He just didn't get the memo that that's not a word we use. And then I pitched the joke, and the room went like white, and I got called out of the room. Like, you've got to be careful with what you say. I'm like, but I prefaced it for 3 times as long as the joke itself.
You got called by the showrunner. The showrunner was uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, he was like, you gotta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, but I anyway. So
yeah, I know.
There are times when you think a room is safe, and you just have to decide it. Nowhere's safe, and write great jokes that are a little more sensitive.
I remember on Just Shoot Me, the rule I remember learning was you could say anything you want as long as it gets a laugh. If it doesn't get a laugh, you've crossed the line.
Well, I don't think that that's true anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, on the last few shows, I'm just careful with what I say.
And how do you think they're breaking in? Like when I broke in, it was you got an agent, you broke in, but how do you think they're breaking in now? New writers?
I think it's probably harder to break in. On Cat, most of the younger writers had been writers' assistants either on that show or on other shows where they knew somebody. 2 came out of like programs.
Okay.
Like diversity programs.
Right.
Great writers, by the way. So I think the programs are working because all the writers were good. But I think it's hard. But most of them seem to have been writers' assistants.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know how. And then what about pilots? We're going to talk more about this later, but you're still selling a ton of pilots. You've always been good at selling pilots. It doesn't seem difficult for you.
I mean, knock wood, I've done an okay job. Yeah, knock wood.
But how do you go about it? How do you go about thinking about? Do you think about what the market wants, or you go, oh, here's an idea?
I often try to think of a funny cold open, and see if that lends itself to a show.
But you don't even know a funny cold open. Like, okay, a guy getting coffee at Starbucks. I mean,
we pitched DAG based on a cold open. We didn't quite know what the show was.
Right. Yes.
Do you know that story?
Well, I remember the show. I think I even helped out a couple of days on it. But But go ahead, tell the story then.
So, my partner and I had an NBC deal, and we shared an office with Jack Burdett, your other friend.
Yep.
Who also had an NBC deal, and we were working on separate pilots. Jack had a pilot called Just Married, with Chris Evans and Zachary Levi as brothers.
Oh my God. Wow.
I know. And Eileen and I had a pilot called A Freak in Brooklyn. And we're working on our pilots, and we were having breakfast in the commissary. And I said, it'd be a cool cold open for a show. And I said, Secret Service agent guarding the president. They come out a door, there's a big crowd. Secret Service agent's looking around, sees a suspicious guy. Tight shot on the guy, looking at the president. Tight shot on the Secret Service agent, watching him. Guy reaches into his coat. Secret Service agent jumps to action, like it's puffed up. Guy pulls out his gun, aims it at the president. Cut to the Secret Service agent snapping to action, leaps. Go to a wide shot, he's leaping away from the president. That's all we had. We're like in the moment of being tested, he saves himself.
Right.
And then gets demoted and has to get back to the A team.
Right.
That's all we had. And I said, we should go pitch that. So we went down the hall to Ted Harbert's office. And Ted Harbert's assistant said, Ted's really busy. I can get you in maybe next week.
Right.
And we said, well, we'll just hang out in the hallway. And if he has 3 minutes, we can pitch this thing in 3 minutes. And we hung out in the hallway. And half an hour or so later, he comes out. He's like, guys, what's going on? We just pitched what I just said to you.
All right.
And he's like, well, that's funny. And we said, yeah. We said, let's go pitch it to the network. He's like, well, we could put something on the books. We're like, well, we just waited for you. Why don't we just do that with the network?
Wait, you're gonna walk up there?
So we did. We got out with the elevator. We go down the hall to Carrie Burke's office.
Uh-huh.
Same thing happens. The assistant says, there's just no way. We're like, well, we'll wait in the lobby.
But was Ted with you?
Ted was with us.
So he was no longer busy now. He was big time. Wow.
So anyway, then Carrie Burke came out. We said the same thing, and she said, well, I like it. So then we had basically a pilot or a script, to figure out.
Right.
As we were figuring it out, we ended up getting a list of who NBC had deals with.
Right.
Talent deals. Found out they had a deal with David Alan Grier. We then heard he had another pilot he was doing. And we said, well, what's that one? They're like, we're not sure, but he plays a chef.
Uh-huh.
So we had a mutual friend, and I asked a friend to see if he would stop by and have breakfast with us. We had a quick breakfast with him at Barney Greengrass. And I said, David, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Would you rather wear an Armani suit or a big white hat? And he said, well, a suit. I'm like, and question 2, would you rather have a gun or a whisk?
That's loaded.
So anyway, he jumped out of the other pilot, jumped onto ours, and we had a green light.
That is such a Hollywood story, and that is not, for anybody listening, that's not how it usually works.
No, that doesn't work like that. I don't think I could do that anymore, but
yeah. How funny is that? But then in your other pilots, kind of the same way, you kind of just think of a cold open, and you just
yeah. I had one that didn't go with 20th, where I just knew it was a dynamic cold open where it's the worst day for 5 characters. Like 5 terrible things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that when I pitched it, I could blast through those 5 things, and each of them were funny, and you learned who each of the characters were in their thing.
Right.
And that then in the course of the pilot, you would see how they're connected with each other. But in both those cases, we started with a cold open.
Wow. And then, but even today, that sounds like something you did with Eileen. Even today, now when you're selling pilots, the same kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the 20th one I did without Eileen, but yeah, I'll often try to, or if I get a pitch, I'll see if I can distill a very dynamic cold open first.
And then you go and pitch that. It's so unusual, I feel, but okay, yeah, I mean, it works. So.
Well, pitching is so nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
It's really nerve-wracking, and a lot of it, you're getting into a lot of detail.
Right.
But I always found that if I knew I could start with a catchy cold open that I had memorized,
right,
that would take all the pressure off.
Wow, that's an interesting tip. That's not how we do it. Maybe we should start doing it that way.
Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
And one time, I had a catchy cold open. I went in, I pitched a thing with this producer, Will Packer.
Mm-hmm.
And at CBS, I knew we didn't have a sale because they didn't like the cold open. And I was like, there's nothing we have to say after this that's going to be better than this.
Right.
So I was making my part of the pitch shorter and shorter because I was like, we got to get out of here. Like this is, and we didn't sell it at all. They hated it.
Yeah, right. But in most pilots you just don't sell. But you have a really good batting average. Seems like you're always busy with something.
A lot of it is numbers. I'll pitch more than I sell. So
right. Well, it's interesting. And are you still? Have you done a lot of movie work though?
a little bit.
Right.
For a while, I was doing a lot of those roundtables.
Yeah. How did you fall into that? I was trying to fall into that. No one wanted it. Couldn't make me happy.
I fell into it with a group of Simpsons writers.
Oh, yeah.
And did a lot of kid shows that were animated, kid movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a little bit of clout from my Nickelodeon show, and then they had all their animation clout. And we would sort of sell ourselves as a group.
Oh, I see. Interesting. As a group.
And we'd read a script, we would individually write, 10, 20 pages of jokes or scenes. Then we would do a day together as a roundtable and turn that into a document, and then just turn the whole document in.
And there's still demand for that. There's still money for that.
I haven't done that in probably 10 years.
Yeah, it's probably.
I don't know.
These are probably. What about kid shows? Because you'll still do that. Well, what's your feeling about working in? Because you've been able to jump back and forth, which is really unusual.
I was worried about it. When I sold True Jackson. When I sold True Jackson, I didn't think I would work on it because I thought I would work on Back to You for 8 years.
Right.
And when that show got canceled suddenly, I was suddenly available to run True Jackson. It turned out to be, like I said, just a blast.
Yeah.
And then I sort of was like, I wonder if I'm stuck in this world now. But then I wasn't.
And that's really unusual. I don't know. But you'll go back and forth now. You'll still do. I mean, I know you have a pilot.
Yeah. We pitched something to Disney. I pitched with a stand-up.
Oh, okay.
And fingers crossed it goes. It's funny.
And how did that happen? How did you team up with the stand-up?
There's a stand-up I know who has a lot of credibility in food.
Okay.
He has a food memoir. He hosts a food show, show on the Food Network. He's got a food podcast, and this was a sort of like a True Jackson set in a restaurant.
Okay.
And I said, hey, you want to do this with me? Because in the event that you get anything on, you really need 2 people.
Yeah.
It's just too hard to do alone.
We 2 people in terms of running it, or in terms of what?
Yeah, I think you need 2 people to run a show.
You really think so?
I do.
Why?
Because somebody's got to be on set. Somebody's got to be in the room. It's good if you can keep both things going at the same time. Someone's got to go to editing.
He was going to star in it, though.
No. He's a writer.
Oh, okay. He's a stand-up, but he's not going to star in it. He's a writer.
Yeah. So I thought he'd be a good one to do it with.
Right. Okay.
And then my Fox pilot I'm doing with Carol Leifer.
Right.
Same thing. I think it takes 2, just 2 people.
So interesting. Does this stand-up have a lot of writing experience?
A little bit, yeah.
A little
bit.
He
had a pilot at ABC too that they just passed on this week.
Yeah, I mean, you're very good at that. When we did Mystery Girls, you were mentoring Shep, and you were letting him. He was as much in the process as you were, and you were really good about that.
He created that show. I was lucky to be aboard.
Yeah, it's true, but you had the experience, and in that case, you needed it. That show was, you needed experience to run that show for sure. So, wow. Okay. Wow. Now, what do you have advice for? I don't know, for young writers. Anybody listening?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice I have.
Yeah.
In really everything, especially in scripts, is surprises. The more you can surprise somebody in your writing, the better.
In terms of plot, or in terms of what? In terms of
everything.
Character?
If there's a joke structure that surprises you, that's better than a familiar joke structure.
Right.
If a villain has a war moment that takes you by surprise, that's great.
Right.
And vice versa. If your hero has a moment of being flawed or making a bad moral choice,
Uh-huh.
as long as it's a surprise, it's pretty interesting. you know, especially when you're staffing a show, you're reading script after script after script.
Hmm.
And you know, you're either getting to page 5 or 10 and saying like, no, like
Right.
not for me.
Right.
Or you're saying perfectly competent.
Right.
But the ones that stick out that go into your third pile are the ones that have a surprising moment. You're like, whoa.
A surprising moment that is not out of character, that is not.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you know, it all has to sort of track and make sense and feel a little grounded, but you want to be surprised.
Right.
You know, you want to get to the ending and not know where the ending's good. You know, a lot of scripts you read some setup on page 3 and you're like, well, I know how the last 10 pages go.
Right. Right.
And if you can have a satisfying ending that doesn't do that, that's better.
That's good advice for anybody. It's good advice for anybody.
Surprises. You know, when you're pitching in a room, like if a character says something that you didn't think they would say, it's better than, you know, 8 people screaming out a variation on something they would say.
Yeah. Right.
Same with pitching. If you can pitch in a way that's sort of surprising, I think you have a better chance.
Was there a moment though when you were coming up that you felt in over your head, that you felt like you didn't know any of this stuff? Especially because you were running a show year 2 without ever being a staff writer. I mean,
well, you know, we were pretty arrogant, me and Eileen, early on.
mhm.
You know, I think I've probably gotten more humility as I've gotten older.
In what way?
You know, now, like, you know, sometimes I'm on page, you know, at an act break, I'm like, I don't think there's anything here.
Uh-huh.
You know, whereas early on we would barrel through scripts and say, well, he did it again. This one's another gem.
We did it again.
And now, you know, more often than not, I'll work on an idea for, you know, a couple weeks and say, nope, I don't think there's anything there.
Right.
Or, you know, or a screenplay, you know, I'll get to page 50 and say, there's nothing left.
Do you write anything for yourself at this point, or is everything trying to sell?
Well, I'll write for myself, hoping that someday I'll sell it.
Uh-huh.
You know, I foolishly will write more than I need to or should.
Uh-huh.
Like, here's 2 examples. One is I briefly was developing this zombie office comedy with John Cryer.
Okay. Oh yeah. Oh, funny. We met with him. This must have been a couple years ago.
Oh yeah. In fact, I almost when I got Big Bang, I got you guys in on it.
Oh right, that was that. Okay, right.
And then when I came out of it, we kept trying to develop it, and then I tried it a little bit with Melissa Rauch as well.
Right.
But I wrote the pilot, which was funny, and I was like, well, as proof of concept, let me write episode 2 also. So I wrote episode 2, which was funny, and then like I didn't have anything to do the week after, so I wrote episode 3.
Right.
And there's really no reason to do that if you don't have a show sold. Like, why are you writing episodes?
Right.
And I'm doing that again right now. There's a sort of character that I think is funny.
Uh-huh.
So I wrote a pilot for this character who's, you know, sort of an oddball crime reporter who's keeps solving crimes.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote the pilot, and then for fun, I wrote episode 2, and then this week, you know, until I get notes on these other pilots, I had nothing to do. So I've been writing episode 3.
It's so interesting when you write. You write. You love to write. And
It's so fun. It's so fun.
because it's the world building. What is it that you like about it?
Yeah, you know, sometimes I just miss the characters.
It's the characters you love.
Sometimes, yeah.
I was trying to think about what exactly it is that I like, and I really think it's much smaller than what you like. It's
What do
just
you like?
it's coming up with. It's really that moment where you pitch something that's funny, and then you get a little dopamine hit. Then you got to do it again. But it's that. It's not being on set. It's not taking pictures with actors. It's not
Yeah.
red carpet. It's not going to events. It's not schmoozing. It's just that one little moment, pitching
Yeah.
a good laugh, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
it's
for
pretty
you,
fun.
but for you, it's broader. It sounds like.
Yeah, but it's still in my head. Like
What do you-
you know, I like sitting at a script and just hearing letting
Right.
the characters talk.
Right.
And there's a freedom of sometimes writing something that isn't for somebody else.
Mhm.
Because you don't have to say like someone is not going to get this joke or this, that I'm wasting too much time on a side conversation that's never gonna, like, this is the first note I'm gonna get is get rid of this whole scene.
Right.
But now with this character I'm writing, she can go off on, page-long tangents about nothing.
Right. And you enjoy that, right? So it's like it's sitting in front of the computer is the enjoyable part. It's not the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, there's a bunch of, like, I love the writing part. I have friends who don't like writing, and I don't understand why they've chosen this profession because, I'll have friends who like grousing about some note they got. I'm like, just go do it.
Right.
Like, just go take the fucking note. What's the problem?
Because they want to protect. It sounds like they probably want to protect what they have, right? No.
A little of protecting, a little bit like, I already did it. Why do I have to do it again? Like, just do it. That's how it works.
Right.
So I like the writing part. I like the money part.
Yeah.
Anytime I get money, I love that.
Right.
I like the reaction. If you're at a table read and you get a laugh, it feels great.
Yeah.
And something that dies, it's the worst. It's terrible.
Right.
Uh,
I remember. You must remember this. We were writing on Just Show Me episode. Steve and I wrote called Jesus. It's Christmas.
uh-huh.
And then I had the script in my hand. It wasn't going over well. And I crossed off the thing and I wrote, Jesus, it's clanking. And I showed it to you. And you started laughing.
Well,
Jesus.
I still have my clank box you made me.
Yeah.
So we should tell your listeners that I don't know if you coined it or who coined clank.
No, you did.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, somehow, if a joke died, one of us would say to the other, clank. Like,
You
just
said
down to two pieces of metal hitting each other.
Yeah, that's how you explain it to me. The sound of a joke bombing is like two pieces of metal hitting each other. Clank. Like I'm sure it was probably like Marsh by pitch a joke. And then you go clank. What's that? That's the sound of a joke dying. It's like, oh, okay.
But I ended up now, for 20-something years writing clank on my script, if a joke dies.
And I just assumed it was like a word that everyone knew, but I think you came up with it and no one knew what that word meant.
Yeah.
How funny, man. But,
Yeah.
But you don't, so it sounds like you write with, you'll write, well, other than Jack, you did a pilot with him, but mostly you're writing with other kind of unknown or new writers or whatever. You're pairing up with them.
Yeah.
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 As opposed to grizzled old vets. Right.
But it's easier to write sometimes with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to write by yourself. I love writing by myself, but sometimes it takes somebody else to say, like, this doesn't make any sense.
How many hours when you're working alone? How many hours will you put in a day?
I write quickly, but if I'm having fun, I wrote a movie for CBS and I ended up writing a draft in like 4 days.
Wow.
And there was one day when I got up early because I was excited and I didn't stop until well after midnight.
Wow. Wow.
It was one of those things where the room gets dark and you're like, what time is it? What happened?
Wow. No, I see. I was working today on something and I got about 3 hours in. I go, I think I've hit the wall now,
That's fine too. It's good to know that too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a law of diminishing returns. If you're not into it, don't do it.
Right.
But, sometimes, you're racing to get it out of your head before it goes away.
No, have you ever directed?
Uh-uh.
You have no interest.
No interest.
Yeah.
I had to direct one little thing for True Jackson in New York.
And
it was kind of exciting because it was on it was during the Macy's parade.
Right, I remember that.
And it was a block from where I grew up. So
Right.
that was kind of exciting to be out there with a crew, and that was kind of exciting.
Right, but other than
otherwise, it's for the birds.
That's so funny. Why do you feel that way?
It's too hard. It's too hard understanding where camera direction.
But you can have an AD, or your DP should be able to help you out with that. But
maybe
there's a lot of questions you have to answer. A lot of standing around. A lot of being in. Yeah.
Have you done it?
Yeah, we did it. We did an episode of Marin, and I was, I was on edge the whole time. Looking at the clock. What's taking so long?
Yeah.
am I going to make my day?
Yeah,
It's so much easier to, as a showrunner, just stand over a director's shoulder and tell them that you're doing it wrong than it is
sure.
to actually do it yourself.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. No, it seems very hard.
yeah. So
It
you have
seems
no,
very hard. And like on True Jackson, especially, I was pretty hands on, and like somebody would block a whole scene, and I'd come in and say like, I kind of think you should come in from the other direction entirely,
right.
and it would blow up their whole scene. Like if I was that guy, I'd be so
Yeah.
exhausted, and you
They
know,
have a bad attitude. When you were working with kids, they had to keep short hours in that show, right?
yeah, that got a little tricky. We would shoot half the show the day before on a pre-shoot day. We would shoot stunts. If something had a special effect and we needed a little time to get it done so we could show the audience during
Right.
the live show, we would do that early the day before. And we would knock off, half the pages, and then we would shoot 6 scenes in front of the audience. But you had your eye on the clock.
Right. Oh, because even on show night, they got to get out early.
Yeah, on show night, I think we had a hard out of 8 p.m. And sometimes, you'd be at 7:30 and you have a scene and a half,
Hmm.
and somebody's screwing around. You're like, gotta go.
Yeah. Did you ever go? Did you ever go over? Can you go over if you have kids?
You can't go over.
You can't. So you just
No, no,
you got
they'll
it.
yeah, no, they'll shut it down. You shut it down. You have to pick it up next week.
And did that ever happen?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Did
No,
you
there were
get-
times when we're like, look, we're just not going to get to it.
Right.
We'll owe that scene, and then we would make the following weeks a little easier to accommodate it.
Did it change the way you broke stories when you're writing for kids?
A little bit probably.
In what way? You're just writing a little more directly, and you're making sure those
Oh,
actors.
no, in terms of what they could pull off. I mean, in terms
Oh,
of schedule, maybe, yeah. But those kids were fantastic.
in terms of what they could pull off emotionally, you mean?
Oh, I mean, Kiki Palmer could do anything.
Right.
And Ashley Argata and Robbie Amell and
Uh-huh.
Matt Shidley, all those kids were just amazing.
Uh-huh.
So there was never any question about them talent-wise being able to do it. It was just, can we shoot this in time?
Can we shoot it in time? Oh, see. Okay.
Yeah. Or if we had a stunt, I'm like, I like it, but it'll take 15 minutes to reset for another take. There's no way.
Right. Right. That's something
You
we'll
know,
think about. Right.
yeah, or some things, we're like, listen, we have one shot at it.
Right. Like you never get an actor wet on a TV show. It takes
We
way.
did. We had an episode with Jeanette McCurdy that was
Uh-huh.
supposed to end with this bucket of paint landing on her head, and it missed.
Uh-huh.
We were out of time. That's it.
That was it. So it just missed on tape. And
It
that was
missed
that.
on tape. We added a sound effect as if it hit her, but it didn't.
Oh, okay.
We may have done a little CG,
Right.
make it look like it hit her a little bit, but it really didn't.
Wow. How funny. How funny. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah, well, especially with kid shows, you can add sound effects like something breaking, and if you look carefully, nothing broke, but it seems like it did.
And so are you excited about, so you must be excited about doing the possibility of doing another kid show.
Yeah, if I get to shoot it, it'll be a blast.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and it's fun too because a lot of these kids I worked with grew up to be stars. So
Right.
that's it's fun knowing them as kids. Like Storm Reed is a big star now. I did a pilot with her when she was 10.
Right.
Kiki's a big star.
So isn't it so weird? It's so, because you must see them as children, but they're not.
Kelly Goss, who was on the United States of Al,
Uh-huh.
I worked with her. She was on True Jackson when she was a kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah. I remember even on Just Shoot Me when, you had worked with Wendy Malick before in Dream On. I was like, wow, you work with, so this actor, like, it just seemed odd to me that you had a relationship with this person from another show.
Yeah, I may have helped her get that job. I think for a while it was going to be Raquel Welch.
Oh, wow.
And I think during casting, I was like saying Wendy Malick over and over again to Steve.
Yeah, because she can hit a joke for sure. I mean, Wendy's fantastic with comedy.
Yeah. in the same way that on Back to You, I pitched Sofia Vergara like ad nauseum.
How did you know her? Where did you know her from?
Hot Properties.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we had a weather girl who was not funny, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, guys, Sofia Vergara, you just gotta just make the change. Sofia Vergara, she's the one.
Right.
And then when they were doing Modern Family, they were like, hey, who was that actress that Andy kept saying?
Right.
So
How funny. How funny. Yeah. Yeah, because you've worked with so many people over and over again, you know.
well, that was the other fun thing with Drew Jackson was calling in favors.
What do you mean?
Like anybody I'd worked with before.
Oh, okay.
So, I'd say to Julie Bowen, hey, come do a day, or French Stewart or Dave Foley or Gail O'Grady. I'm like, come on, come play with us.
Uh-huh. And they just say, dude, I got it. We developed a pilot for Marilyn Rice Cup, the comedian, and it didn't go. But then we were doing Marin, and we needed somebody, an actor, a comic to play themselves. So I texted Marilyn. I go, hey, Marilyn, I know I did short notice, but do you want to be on our show? And she writes back, yes. Who is this? She accepted the job without even knowing what it was.
Yeah.
So funny.
No, on True, I would say to people, come play with us. I won't waste your time. Rehearse as much or as little as you want.
Uh-huh.
And almost everybody said, yeah.
That's so nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully you get another experience like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what do you is that, I don't know. So what do you credit your longevity to? I mean, you really have, look at your shows. Your credit list is crazy.
Well, listen, I get nervous that I'm hanging on by a thread, but
Uh-huh.
I think part of it is that, I'm not a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I tell lots of writers, and I do it myself, is keep an eye on the showrunner.
Mm-hmm.
See what they're buying, what they're not buying, what they're responding to, what they're like, what's bugging them,
Yep.
and do that.
Right. Right.
I've seen, I've seen writers not do it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, buddy, like, that's driving the showrunner crazy. You got to knock it off.
Yeah. I say that a lot. I say your job as a staff writer is to make the best version of the show that the showrunner wants to make, not the best show, the best version that they want, and that's it.
Yeah, no, you've got to be a soldier,
Mm-hmm.
and anticipate what they want. So so some of what it is keeping an eye on them.
Uh-huh. Right.
And some, and they're people. So sometimes they're stressed, and you're like, what can I do for you? What can I get you?
Right. Right.
Would it help if I wrote an outline for that thing tonight, or would it help if I took 3 people in the other room and wrote the B story?
Right. Right.
So it's. I think I've held on because I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And on Big Bang, like there's lots of times like, can somebody go do the audio, the audio mix? I'm like, yeah, I'll go do it.
Right.
Can somebody go to casting? Sure.
Right.
Or can somebody go in the other room and write the scene?
Right. Being versatile, being team player.
Being versatile, not being a pain in the ass. I've worked with other writers who are pains in the ass. I'm like, you've got to knock it off.
Yeah. And they don't even see it. They don't even hear it. Yeah.
Or they're rude to to the writer's PA, and you're like it's making me uncomfortable when you're rude. So don't do that.
And do they listen to you?
Some people can't help themselves.
You can't help it. Yeah. And do they disappear?
Some have, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know one writer who without fail would yell at a writer's assistant every day about something their lunch order got wrong.
Really?
Yeah, I'd be like who gives a shit about your lunch? You've got to knock it off.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Put in place, man. But for the most part, I would imagine behavior among writers has probably gotten better over the years. I would think, no? You worked on some shows. I don't have to say what they were, but early in your career, where the showrunner would disappear, and then you'd be left there till 4 a.m. when they came back on their date.
Yeah, that's true.
Fly now.
No, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a rare situation. I can't imagine it would be tolerated now, but that writer was a genius.
Uh-huh.
So it's hard, I don't know what to say. I mean, we couldn't get out of there quick enough.
Yeah, right. Right. Have you had other than that, have you had a lot of you haven't had many really bad experiences, right?
Yeah, about a couple.
Really? We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would. I had a run of tricky actors.
Right. Oh, well, that's true. I do know that. But it was
Yeah,
a
yeah. No,
miserable.
there was one actor who it was a show I was running,
Mhm.
without fail, would scream at me in front of the crew, like scream at me.
Yeah.
Well, this one actor, it took me a while to figure out, would fuel his performance by getting hopping mad. It was
Mhm.
part of his process.
Oh, great.
So without fail on Thursday, he'd be upset about something, and you'd be like, "Hey, you're wanted on stage." And you're like, "Hey," and you'd get just screamed at. And I remember like one time getting screamed at, and it went on so long that I stopped paying attention, and I was like up here, and I like looked down, I'm like, "Man, that one man is so mad at that other man." I
Wonder
wonder
what
what the
that other
second,
man's gonna do.
yeah, I wonder what that second man did to make the first man so mad.
That's hilarious. That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
and then invariably it was like about some plot point that had been in the script for months.
Right.
Like,
Right.
why am I ripping up this check? I'm like,
Right.
oh my god, that we talked about this. You would explain it. It was like, you're not allowed to rip up money. Like, it's
Yeah.
not money. It's like, ugh.
Oh my God. But that's all. Those become great stories, but not at the moment. But
No, in the moment, I would often like they'd ask for me, and I'd tell Marsh they were asking for him.
that's hilarious, man. That's when when there were times when Steve and were on set and someone's getting mad. They want to talk to the showrunner, and I pointed him, and he pointed me.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man.
Well, on Mystery Girls, I don't know if you remember this. There were times when Tori and Jenny would come into the room
Mhm.
in a great mood, and at a certain point, Jenny would get mad
Uh-huh.
and leave the room furious, and we would play what set Jenny off.
Right. And who
Look,
knows? Who
and we
knows?
would all have a different take. Like I think maybe it was when you said somebody else was pretty, maybe.
Oh my God, it's hilarious. Whew. Oh my God. What all right. Well, I've had you for a long time on here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but how much do you have any other parting words of wisdom for people?
No, like I said, surprises in your scripts are great.
Mhm.
Um, Something that's truthful to you
Um,
is better. Like, for example, I like magic, so I
yeah,
put magic in a lot of scripts.
right,
But it doesn't like that's an example of putting something in your scripts that you like,
right,
which
right,
makes them sort of specific to you. That you're the person worth hiring because you've got a unique perspective.
right. Very personal. Interesting.
Yeah, I had a friend years ago who's like was gonna write a Frasier spec about a wine club. I'm like, do you drink wine? They're like, no.
Mm,
Like, why would you write that episode? What can
right,
you bring to a wine club episode that somebody else can't do better than you?
right,
And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you're a marathon runner.
right,
Do an episode about Niles running for the marathon.
right.
Like, make it, bring something unique to it
Mhm.
so that you're bringing something that someone else can't.
Right. And did they take
Or
your advice?
what's that?
Did they take your advice?
Sometimes, yeah,
No.
yeah, sometimes, yeah. Um, so surprises, something unique, seizing opportunities,
Yeah.
on one show not long ago. We let one of the writers' PAs pitch. We said, listen, why don't you come in and pitch an idea?
Uh-huh.
And he didn't.
You didn't.
He didn't. So a week later, I said, hey, did you end up pitching them an idea? And he said, no, not yet. I'm like, you should get on that.
Right.
He said, yeah, I'm working on one. I'm like, if I were you, I wouldn't go to bed tonight. I'm like, come up with a pitch that is so good they can't not do it and get it to them tomorrow. I'm like, quit fucking around. This opportunity doesn't come up too often.
Right. He just felt he wasn't ready.
He just thought he had all the time in the world.
Oh, okay.
But you have to seize opportunities. They, they pop up and you got to take them.
Right.
Yeah. You can't let them slip away.
Yeah. Andy Gordon, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, Jamin. Always good to see you.
This is don't go anywhere. This has been a great don't go anywhere. This has been a great talk. Thank you, everyone. Until next week, we have more great guests coming your way. And that's it. Thank you again, Andy. Keep writing. Okay.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.